She said it was just a work trip, 45 minutes away. So why was she packing an overnight bag, and why was he there waiting? I used to think my marriage was solid. We didn't have any serious problems and life felt steady, until earlier this year when things slowly began to shift. I never saw myself as someone easily pushed around, but I started noticing my wife, Sandra, subtly taking more control over decisions that affected both of us. It made me wonder if the balance in our relationship had tilted without me realizing. Honestly, a lot of it was on me. I had this habit of avoiding conflict by simply agreeing with her on things I thought weren't worth arguing over. I figured, why fight over the small stuff? But gradually, those small things started showing up more and more, and I realized I needed to start standing my ground before it got out of hand. Sandra, she's 39 now, had a particular way of getting her way. If I went along with her, I'd get warmth, affection, and amazing home-cooked meals. If I didn't, well, let's just say things turned cold quickly. Still, the biggest reason I often chose not to challenge her was because I was always swamped. I work as an engineer for a major construction firm based out of the county capital, and summers are especially hectic for us. Between long hours and work-related stress, I just didn't have the energy to worry about household disagreements. Outside of work, I tried to carve out time for myself. I'd occasionally go to the golf club, which Sandra wasn't exactly thrilled about. Last year, though, I started spending more time at the local stables, where our 13-year-old daughter Lena kept her horse, a generous gift from Sandra's parents. Sandra's always had a fear of horses, so she insisted I be the one to help Lena out there. I wasn't keen on it at first, but something changed. That something was Marianne. She was another parent at the stables, a kind woman with a daughter in the same riding program. At first it was just small talk, but she was patient and helpful, showing me the basics since I had no idea what I was doing around horses. In return, I'd pitch in with heavier tasks, stuff her husband avoided, claiming he was allergic to horses. Marianne and I got along well. We laughed, we talked, and time passed easier when she was around. It was innocent, truly, there was no affair, no betrayal. But I won't lie, one day when she looked at me and teased, "If we were single, I'd have you wrapped around my finger in no time," my heart skipped a beat. I think she noticed the flicker in my eyes because she followed up with something more serious. She admitted she wasn't happy at home and asked, "Are you the same kind of guy at home as you are here?" I told her, "You'd have to find out, if we were both single." She smiled and said she'd keep that in mind. Despite these emotional tremors, life with Sandra remained comfortably funded. We both had good jobs and solid salaries, which meant we didn't have to worry about money. My position also gave us excellent banking perks, so financially we lived quite well. I bought us a house in a really nice neighborhood, quiet, green, and filled with good people. We had a strong circle of friends there, and many of them seemed a bit envious of my life. They only ever saw Sandra's public side, gracious, polished, the perfect hostess whenever we had guests over for dinner or through one of our weekend parties. Our story began in the most unexpected way, at an airport of all places. We were both headed to Mallorca on separate trips with our respective friend groups, when we ended up standing behind each other at the check-in counter. That little coincidence led to several more accidental run-ins on the island, at cafes, beaches, and even the same guided tour. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to ask for her number. I called her later that week and invited her to a beautiful seaside restaurant. That dinner was the spark that started everything. Even after the trip, we stayed in close contact. The connection we had was real and immediate, easy laughter, natural chemistry, and the kind of comfort you don't always find early on. I can honestly say we were happy together in those early days. But things weren't always smooth sailing, especially when we got back home. Sandra's social circle, the kind of people who sipped expensive wine and dropped their last names into every conversation, didn't exactly welcome me with open arms. They hadn't minded me back on the island, where they probably saw the whole thing as a holiday fling. But back in the real world, they suddenly became very aware of my background, like the fact that I grew up in a rough part of town or that my name didn't come with a silver spoon. It stung a little being judged like that. My upbringing might not have been glamorous, but I'd worked hard, carved out a good career, and built a decent life for myself. Still, some of her friends couldn't look past the surface. Thankfully, Sandra didn't share their attitude. Despite what people might have thought from the outside, I never saw her as a trophy or a status symbol. She was just Sandra, the kind, smart, beautiful woman I loved. It just so happened her parents had more money than mine ever did. About 6 months into dating, something unexpected happened. Sandra had to stop taking a particular medication for a while on her doctor's advice. We hadn't been especially careful during that time, and sure enough, she got pregnant. We were both caught off guard, but neither of us panicked. We wanted to do things right, for our child and for ourselves. So, we made a quick decision to get married. Her parents, much to my relief, didn't object at all. In fact, they were surprisingly supportive. As a wedding gift, they gave Sandra the deed to a stunning summer house by a lake just outside the city. It was a clever move on their part. It allowed them to keep the property in the family, avoid some future inheritance complications, and still visit whenever they wanted. But for us, it became a sanctuary, a beautiful spot where we could dream a little bigger. At that time, Sandra was climbing the corporate ladder. She worked at a top-tier insurance company and had just been promoted to a vice department role handling special projects. I was proud of her, but I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments of tension ahead. Over time, I started to feel it, that quiet, creeping shift in the way Sandra carried herself. Her new position at work, the one she had been so excited about, was beginning to cast shadows over our marriage. She wasn't the Sandra I had known, at least not entirely. There was a distance forming between us, subtle at first, like the echo of a door slowly closing. I tried bringing it up. One evening, I asked if something was bothering her, if maybe she was overwhelmed. She brushed it off with a tired smile and said she was just adjusting to the new role. Lots to learn, she told me, and the pressure's higher than before. That made sense. It was a big step up for her, and I wanted to believe that was all it was. She also reassured me that nothing was wrong between us, that she trusted me completely. And I believed her. But I couldn't help noticing how she kept the details of her work more guarded than usual. I'd always had a general sense of what she was involved in, especially since I kept up with local business news. But now she seemed to draw a line between work and home, and I didn't know why. Still, I didn't push. I figured if something was important, she'd tell me. That was until a particular Tuesday evening. Sandra came home late, earlier than midnight but well past dinner, and the look on her face stopped me in my tracks. She wasn't just tired, she seemed off. Nervous maybe. Or conflicted. Her eyes avoided mine, and her voice had this unusual stiffness when I asked, "What's going on? Did something happen at work? Were you let go?" She gave me a half laugh and shook her head. "No, nothing like that. Actually, it's quite the opposite. The project is wrapping up soon, and there's going to be a dinner on Friday night. A kind of celebration." But it didn't sit right. There was something in the way she said it. I asked where this dinner would be, and that's when my heart skipped a beat. "Just a small town along the coast," she said. "About 45 kilometers out." Only 45 kilometers? That's barely a half-hour drive. So why was she planning to stay the night? I tried to stay composed. "So, you'll be staying over for a dinner that's just 30 minutes from home?" She looked at me as if the answer was obvious. "The lead manager can't attend until later in the evening and there'll be wine. I'd rather not drive back that late." It felt wrong. The pieces didn't add up, especially because I had a pretty good idea of who might be involved. One name in particular came to mind: Oscar. Now, Oscar and I go way back. We grew up in the same neighborhood, and even back then he was the type you watched out for. He was slick, good with words, and always had a way of spinning trouble into opportunity. He once sold a beat-up car to the daughter of a local landlord and somehow turned that into a marriage. They had 2 kids, but their relationship was unconventional to say the least. She had a secret girlfriend, and Oscar, well, he bragged openly about his flings with married women at the lake where he kept a flashy little chalet. That lakefront area used to be a gem, but it had gone downhill over the years. Still, Oscar made it his playground, and his name carried just enough influence to stay dangerous. I couldn't shake the feeling he was somehow mixed into whatever Sandra was working on. I didn't confront her though, not yet. I needed more clarity, so I kept my tone casual. "Seems like an odd setup. You're the only one from your department going?" She nodded almost too casually. "Yes, just me this time. But it's a big deal. Good food, good wine. You don't want me driving home drunk, do you?" Her attempt at humor didn't land. My chest tightened with something I didn't want to name just yet. I looked Sandra in the eye and asked, "Do you honestly believe you're qualified to evaluate 45 different chalets? Especially when they're all in varying states of disrepair?" She didn't flinch. "I'm getting a guest house in the resort area for free," she replied almost too quickly. "Plus, I'll be paid for the overtime and I get a daily allowance on top of that." "All right," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "But who exactly is insisting you go out there Friday night? Your boss? The client? Or is this something you volunteered for?" "My boss," she said without hesitation. "He was supposed to go himself, but something came up, so he asked me to step in and represent the company. It's a big deal, an opportunity for me. And honestly, I don't think it's your place to interfere." At that moment I felt a part of me snap. I knew what was really going on, or at least I had a strong hunch. And it didn't sit right. See, I know that area she was heading to. And more importantly, I know the man who practically runs that lakeside playground, Oscar. Oscar and I grew up in the same tough neighborhood. Even back then he had a reputation for being slick, for talking his way into and out of just about anything. Years ago he married the daughter of a local slumlord after selling her a busted car. They had 2 kids, but the marriage was nothing more than a business deal. She had a secret girlfriend, and Oscar, well, he bragged to anyone who'd listen about his escapades with other men's wives. He even showed me photos once. Him with some attractive businesswoman after one of his so-called maintenance negotiations. He suggested I could join in if I was ever open-minded enough to work with him. I told him where he could go, and that he'd need a one-way ticket. Oscar liked to say those photos were his bait. Women can't resist success, he once told me with that smug smirk of his. It was gross. Everyone at the golf club knew what kind of man he was. And if I knew, then Sandra's boss surely did too. So when I found out that same conservative boss had encouraged my wife, my Sandra, to spend the night at Oscar's chalet, I was stunned. She wasn't clueless. She had to know what it meant, what it looked like. Now she was sitting at the kitchen table, tears rolling down her cheeks. "It's not what you think," she said softly, almost whispering. "I swear it's not like that." But to me it was worse. Not because I thought she'd done something already, but because she was willing to go along with this, ignoring the obvious signs, pretending this was all just business. I didn't say a word. Just nodded, stood up and said, "Thanks for the information." Then I turned to her, still crying, and added, "I've got something important I need to take care of." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Sandra looked stunned. She wasn't used to this side of me, decisive, angry, walking away without another word. I felt like a dam had broken. Like every time I bit my tongue in the past had finally caught up with me. As I opened the car door, she chased after me, standing in the doorway shouting, "Don't do anything stupid. If you lay a finger on Mr. Pyler, I swear I'll file for divorce." But I wasn't listening. My blood was boiling and my feet knew where they were going before I did. I found Oscar at the golf club as expected. He had that same smug look, probably thinking I was there to chat. I didn't say a word, just walked up and let my fists do the talking. 2 solid punches knocked him flat on his back. And before his buddies or the other players had time to break it up, I made sure to say what I needed to say, not with words but with presence. The message was loud and clear. As the small crowd around us started to gather, I made it clear, "Don't get in my way." I turned and walked calmly toward the clubhouse where I had parked my car. But waiting there by the entrance was a police cruiser, lights off but presence unmistakable. 2 young officers stepped out as I approached. They weren't aggressive, more like firm but respectful. One of them asked, "You want to make this easy or hard on yourself?" I nodded and said I'd cooperate. No point in making a scene. They opened the back door and I got in. The ride was quiet. I sat there, staring out the window, the weight of everything slowly sinking in. It wasn't fear I felt, it was this strange mix of exhaustion and clarity, like I'd finally crossed a line I should have drawn years ago. At the station they asked me a few questions about what happened at the golf club. I gave them the short version. They weren't too interested in turning it into more than it was, at least not right away. After a while they let me go. Another patrol car drove me back to pick up my car from the clubhouse. To be honest, I wasn't too worried about it legally. Cases like these tend to gather dust on a shelf, and if nothing comes of them in 2 years they're usually dismissed. Still, I knew I'd have to be careful. But in that moment I didn't regret it. Not for a second. When I walked back into the house, Sandra was still at the kitchen table. Her face was pale, and she looked up like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice tight. "At the police station," I said bluntly. Her eyes widened. "What were you doing there?" I shrugged. "Just answering a few questions about your good friend Oscar." "At the golf course." She went dead quiet. Her face went white like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh Lord," she whispered. "What have you done?" I didn't answer. What could I say that hadn't already been said with my fists? The next morning she barely spoke a word to me. Just before leaving for work she muttered, "We need to talk tonight." I told her, "Sure. We'll talk." But my mind was already ahead of her. As soon as I got to work, I called up an old friend of mine, a tough-as-nails attorney who had handled a few legal matters for the company in the past. We trusted each other and I knew he didn't mess around. I filled him in on what happened and without hesitation, he said he'd help me pursue Sandra's employer. Just 30 minutes later he called me back. "I've arranged a meeting with the district chief at her office," he said. 2 o'clock sharp. That meeting wasn't just about Sandra. It was about the man who encouraged a married woman to spend the night at Oscar's chalet, under the paper-thin excuse of a business deal. My lawyer didn't hold back. He laid out the facts, made it clear what kind of legal mess they'd be facing if this turned into something public. Even someone completely naive, he said, could have seen what Oscar was after. And your people sent her straight to him. The district chief started sweating. You could see it, the guilt, the fear of consequences finally catching up. We pressed harder. In the end, they agreed to cancel the deal with Oscar Pilar entirely. They even signed a formal statement and agreed to cover all of my legal fees. Later that afternoon, my lawyer called with another update. Turns out, Oscar's insurance on the lakeside property had just been pulled. The deal fell apart and now the place was back on the market. He told me if his firm landed the new contract, I'd be getting a nice bonus. That evening, Sandra came home. I barely recognized her, fury in her eyes, voice shaking. She launched into a tirade the moment she stepped inside. I couldn't catch half of what she screamed, the words all running together in a blur of rage and resentment. But I stood there calm as ever. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd finally taken control of my life again. I wasn't exactly Sandra's favorite person that evening. She stormed through the house, muttering under her breath, then suddenly yelled something about taking refuge at her summer house. Within minutes, she had thrown together a suitcase and slammed the door behind her. I didn't stop her. Lena, our daughter, had watched the whole thing unfold from the hallway, her expression tense and unsure. She didn't say much, but I could see the worry in her eyes. I told her gently that everything was going to be all right. That night, after the dust settled, I ended up at the stables, where Marian met me with a quiet smile that said more than words ever could. We talked for a while, the air between us full of unspoken questions. Then, just before she left, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't you think life would be a whole lot simpler if we were with each other instead of with people who don't see us?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said. Then I kissed her, longer this time and with more certainty. We both felt something shift in that moment. A kind of relief. Like, no matter how our marriages ended up, we had found something steady to hold on to. Later that night, back home in my den, I checked the security system at Sandra's summer house. The place had an older setup. Motion detectors, door and window sensors. Sure enough, I saw that Sandra had arrived. The alarm had been disabled just like I expected. But I'd also installed a secondary system, one she didn't know about. And I was the only one with remote access to it. Friday rolled around. After work, Lena and I stopped at the grocery store and picked up ingredients for dinner. She helped me unpack the bags in the kitchen, and while I prepped the food, I noticed I hadn't heard a word from Sandra since she walked out. I told myself I wouldn't be the one to reach out first. Instead, I looked forward to seeing Marianne again at the stables on Saturday. I needed that peace. But around 6:30 that evening, my phone buzzed with an alert from the summer house. I opened the app, and my gut twisted. The live feed showed a silver Lexus SUV parked outside. Not Sandra's car. I clicked through the still images. The feed showed movement in the living room. Then a voice, female, shouting from the master bedroom. I tapped the audio, turned on my phone's recorder, and crept in closer to listen. Outside the bedroom door, I heard Sandra scream, "No. I never agreed to anything like that." Then a man's voice snapped back, "Shut up. Max promised me a good time, and I'm going to get it." Sandra wasn't backing down. "No one takes advantage of me. You've already crossed the line." He got louder, angrier, clearly not used to being told no. Then came a sound I'll never forget. A thud, something sharp hitting skin. My body tensed. That's when I lost it. I barged in and saw him, the man, lunging toward her. I didn't hesitate. I went after him, throwing punch after punch until he dropped to the floor. He was still conscious but too dazed to fight back. Without saying a word, I dragged him out of the house and laid him down in front of his SUV, making sure the license plate was clear in the shot. I pulled out my phone, switched to video mode, and hit record. He didn't move. Didn't run. Just laid there breathing heavily. When I finished filming, I leaned in and said, "If you even think about bragging about this, that video goes public. You'll regret it." Then I stood up and shouted, "Get off my property." He didn't say a word. Just got in the car and drove off. Back inside, I found Sandra in the bathroom, already in the shower. The door was locked. She didn't say anything and I didn't knock. I sat in the hallway back against the wall, my fists still aching. I wasn't proud of what I'd done, but I knew one thing for sure. I gave that man exactly what he had coming. When I stepped into the bedroom at the summer house, one detail stuck with me. Both Sandra's and Oscar's clothes were neatly folded over chairs on opposite sides of the bed. No signs of a struggle, no mess. Everything looked too calm, too intentional. I snapped a few photos just in case Sandra ever tried to say something happened that didn't. If she decided to claim Oscar had forced himself on her, I needed something to protect myself from getting caught in that narrative. I found a plastic trash bag in the kitchen, went back upstairs and started collecting Oscar's things. His shirt, his shoes, his phone charger. Then I scribbled down a short note, not exactly truthful but believable, that I'd walked in to find Oscar already gone, that he'd apparently left in such a rush he forgot his stuff. Maybe he even tripped on the way out. Who's to say? Accidents happen, right? When I handed Sandra his bag and calmly explained what I'd done, she surprised me. She actually smiled and said, "Thanks for taking care of that." Just like that, like she didn't want to deal with the mess he left behind, physically or emotionally. Later I sat Lena down and told her the truth. Well, most of it. I explained that her mom and I were going through a rough patch and for now we'd probably be living apart. But I made sure she knew she could see either of us whenever she wanted. She just nodded and said that was fine. She's more resilient than I gave her credit for. That Saturday I saw Marianne again at the stable. I told her that for the first time in a long while, I could actually start thinking about being single. I explained it would take about 6 months to finalize everything legally, but emotionally I was already letting go. I shared what had happened at the summer house, not to sway her, not to guilt her into making a decision, but because it felt honest. If she decided to leave her husband, that choice would have to be hers. Back home I found Sandra sitting alone at the kitchen table. Her eyes were tired, her face drawn. She looked like someone who had spent days trying to sort out a storm in her head. She wanted to talk. I let her. But I made it clear, I didn't need more explanations. What I'd seen, what I'd heard, that was enough for me. Oddly enough, everything started falling into place after that. There were no big arguments, no drawn-out fights. We agreed on shared custody for Lena. She'd live mainly with me, but could spend as much time as she wanted with her mom. Sandra didn't fight it. She didn't fight me on anything. And that's what surprised me the most. It hit me then, Sandra wanted out of this marriage just as badly as I did. Maybe even more. Still, one thing kept eating at me. Why did she let Oscar get that close? Why him, of all people? Then I checked a hidden outdoor camera I'd forgotten I'd installed years back. Let's just say I saw enough to answer my question. A few days later, I went straight to her supervisor's office. I wanted answers, about his role in all of this. About why he sent my wife to Oscar's place, knowing full well who the man was and what he was capable of. The smug look on his face when I walked in was enough to light the fuse. He laughed. "What are you gonna do about it?" So I showed him. Let's just say he probably won't be sitting comfortably for a while. And before I walked out, I gave him a clear warning. If he went to the police, the whole story, including his involvement, would come out. He didn't say a word. The next week passed quietly until one afternoon when Marianne called me at work. Her voice was shaky. She said the owner of a local gambling shop had contacted her. Apparently, her husband owed him money. A lot of money. When she confronted her husband at his job, things escalated. He exploded, yelled, threatened her. Said he'd deal with her when he got home. Now she was too scared to go back. After Marianne called me, afraid to go back home, I made a decision. I brought along one of the carpenters from our construction site, a big guy, reliable, and someone I trusted. He helped me quietly get her and the kids out of that house, no fuss, no drama. We didn't say much about it at the time, it wasn't necessary. What mattered was getting her somewhere safe. Once we got settled, we started reorganizing my house so her kids would feel at home. Each child had their own room now. To our relief, and honestly our joy, Lena and Marianne's 2 children, who already knew each other from the riding club, clicked instantly. They acted like sisters, laughing, sharing their things, staying up late talking. Felt right. Her son, Alexander, and I built our bond faster than I expected. He took to me, and before long I was going to his soccer games, cheering him on, helping with homework. His unofficial soccer dad. That meant more to me than I could have imagined. And as for Marianne and me, our relationship deepened. The first night we were truly close was unforgettable. There was tenderness but also trust. She was warm, expressive, and unlike what I'd grown used to. Where Sandra had grown distant and disinterested, Marianne made me feel wanted. She encouraged openness, both emotionally and physically. It wasn't just a new chapter, it felt like a second chance. At some point, Sandra and I agreed to meet at a quiet cafe downtown to talk about Lena. It was a serious conversation, calm and honest. Even though I knew more than enough about her past with Oscar and Max, I never brought it up. I didn't need to. I didn't want to drag those ghosts back to life. But what happened next caught me off guard. Sandra started talking. And not the surface-level stuff. Real confession. She told me point blank that wrecking our marriage was the biggest mistake of her life. That she missed me, missed our family, and felt an ache for the life she'd walked away from. But then, almost in the same breath, she admitted that her guilt had cooled over time, mostly because of the career path opening up for her. She was on track to become the first woman at her level in their district office. That ambition had dulled the weight of regret. As for Max, she said she didn't love him. Never had. She never planned to leave me for him, and she only saw him as a supportive friend and mentor. Their weekly meetings, she said, had become a kind of routine, more enjoyable as work sessions than anything personal. Then she opened up even more. Turns out, Max had fallen into serious financial trouble after his divorce. When Oscar dangled a big kickback deal related to some insurance scheme involving new problem area properties, Max bit. He needed the money too badly to say no. Oscar, of course, expected his payment to come with perks, and Max, desperate to keep the deal alive, had promised him one. That promise? A night with Sandra. And he made that clear to her over lunch that Friday. Sandra refused. She told Max about Oscar's twisted behavior and made it clear she wasn't getting involved in any of it. She even offered to talk to her parents about loaning the money to pay Oscar back, plus interest. But Oscar wasn't after money anymore. He wanted payback. And he wanted to use her to get it. Max panicked. Sandra said he didn't try to force her, just begged her not to let him down. But Oscar didn't back off. He was determined. That evening, after lunch with Max, he called her, briefly, just to ask about his clothes. That was the last she heard from him. When she mentioned that strange phone call, she gave me a long, searching look. "What did you say to him?" she asked quietly. I looked her in the eye and told her the truth more or less. "I convinced Oscar to behave," I said. "And let's just say, he won't be bothering you ever again." She didn't press me after that. I didn't care what happened between Oscar and Max after everything unraveled. Whatever came of that, well, it was their mess to clean up. I'd already done what I needed to. Sandra ended up tending to Max for a few days while he recovered from the beating I gave him. But instead of getting closer, the two of them just argued. Constantly. She accused him of ruining her marriage and he snapped back, blaming her for chasing after ambition more than love. Eventually, she reported what had happened to the new district chief, told him the truth about her involvement in that shady deal with Oscar. By then, Max had moved up north and Sandra barely noticed he was gone. She didn't miss him for a second. Why would she? She had taken his job, became the head of his old department. Though, after a company shakeup, the role had lost some of its power. Still, she'd made it farther than any other woman had in that district office. Highest-ranking female they'd ever had. But now, in quieter moments, she told me it hadn't been worth it. She said the price she paid to get there, her marriage, her peace of mind, was too high. She cried often, alone in that empty house, filled with a success that brought no real joy. She even admitted that sometimes she thought about going public. Telling everything, blowing the whistle, and quitting that job for good. I told her, simply, "I wish you the best in your new life." And I meant it. 2 months after Marianne and her kids moved in with Lena and me, our home was full of life again. Laughter echoed in the halls, the sound of kids giggling together became the music of our days. Friday nights turned into family nights, games, stories, pizza, popcorn. The kind of tradition you look forward to all week. The funny thing is, the kids enjoyed it so much they didn't even want to go spend time with their other parents. They saw what we had here, something steady, something kind, and they chose to stay in it. And me? I was happy again. I had a woman beside me who loved me as I was. A partner who saw me. A home that felt real. I had come out of the fire scarred, sure, but stronger too. So now, dear listeners, I want to hear from you. Have you been through something like this? Has anyone here lost themselves in a relationship, only to find their way back through pain and healing? Drop a comment, share your thoughts, your stories, whatever's on your mind. Thanks for reading. It means more than you know.